Hi, my name is Rich Eggleston. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Fitchburg Historical Society, and there's a very interesting thing that's happened at the Fitchburg Public Library. The Fitchburg Historical Society and the Fitchburg Public Library got together, we applied for grants, and we created a mural in the Fitchburg room of the library. And we got donations to the public library, donations to the Fitchburg Historical Society memorials for people. We got a grant from the Dane County Cultural Affairs Commission with support from the Jerry Fauci Foundation, and we commissioned a mural that was based on photographs of the historic village of Fitchburg, which was located on Went Road, and was basically one of the centers of the community in the early 1900s. The idea for this came from a woman named Kay Hardy, who is an 80-year-old former school teacher and school principal. And what she did was she thought that there's this blank wall in the Fitchburg room, and that there should be something there. And you know, I thought maybe just tiny little photographs, frames, and so on, but she had a bigger vision, and she wanted to create a mural of this village of Fitchburg that she knew when she was a kid. And she was a child, grew up in Fitchburg, and she went to the Mrs. Wentz store and bought penny candy there. And then when she had a riding horse, and she had the horse shod at the blacksmith shop, all of which was on Went Road. Some of those buildings are still there, and you can see them in the mural because the mural is based on what was there in the early 1900s. And when Kay was a child, it was there too. What happened was that the first thing that Kay had some shirt-tail relatives who were in the mural business, and one of them is Joan Christgau, and they came together with a concept. They had to translate a drawing to the wall. So how do you do that? I didn't know. What you do is, what they did was that they took and drew a line across the wall to create the horizon for the picture and for the mural. And then they projected the image that was a line drawing that they created, and they projected it onto the wall with a PowerPoint projector, basically. And they drew, I guess they used pencil drawings and so on, and they drew this. Then the problem that they had was that the pictures of the time are not in color. So they had to imagine the colors that were sort of at the turn of the century. Victorian houses were brilliantly colored and so on. It was easy to do some things, like the sky was pretty easy. And then the locomotive was easy because they only came in black, just like Model T Fords. And the rest was a little bit more difficult. I thought that some of this was that they got the color absolutely right, because I saw sepia-toned pictures from the time, and the sepia tone was sort of brownish and so on, and a lot of that stuff is there. So they drew in their conception of what life would be like in the village of Fitchburg around in the early part of the 20th century. and there were people, there were the farm dogs. This was kind of a mixed breed dog. It's supposed to be a border collie, but Joan said she threw in a certain amount of collie also. The locomotive is based on the locomotives that ran on that line of part of the Illinois Central Railroad. This line went from Freeport to Madison, Freeport, Illinois to Madison, Wisconsin, and it didn't use really big locomotives. So that locomotive is historically representative of what was on that line at the time. The whole idea of the mural, Joan told me, was to take the viewer back to an imaginary time. And you have to think about what Fitchburg was like in 1910, 1920, and before the internet, before television, before even radio. It was just a different place. Time went at a different speed, and so these are the people, Joan Christgau and Tom Green, who basically did this mural in 2 weeks. Now there are interesting little things in the mural that are based on what was really there, either what we have pictures of, the Wentz store that Kay Hardy remembers buying penny candy at. That's represented on the mural. The blacksmith shop where Kay had her horses shod, her riding horse shod, is there, and there's a blacksmith in there. The locomotive engineer has a handlebar mustache, and kind of representative of what the engineers on the railroad were. You know, they had that same kind of costume. And so we're all very proud of this because it's an unusual project. It was, I think, a fine addition to the library. I hope that the library likes it a lot. The folks who watched the mural being completed included Bill and Carol Kinney, who were one of the members of one of the pioneer families in Fitchburg, one of the first Irish families that settled in Fitchburg in the 1850s, I believe. And they were very enthusiastic. Everybody that I've talked to at the Historical Society is just extremely pleased with the way the mural came out. Also, really the story of rural Wisconsin in the early 20th century, because there were a few big cities, but then the rest were small communities like Fitchburg, and it shows how people lived 100 years ago. There's a picture from the Wisconsin Historical Society that shows the station in, we're not sure of the year, but it shows the station very much the way Joan and Tom painted it, that there's this little gingerbread up at the top of the station, and they are, they replicated that, and they showed the windows are that way. There's a Lutheran church way down at the back of the mural, and the Lutheran church has at the it has a steeple, which it originally didn't when it was built. They added the steeple later, and we think by this time there was a steeple on the church. Way in the background, near the corner of what is now Highway M and Went Road. And the reason that it's called Went Road was because of Mary Went had that general store, and it operated for a long, long time into the 1960s even. It shows the Lapley lumberyard and feed mill, and and the Lapleys built a whole heck of a lot of barns. There's a picture of the Lapley feed mill, and you can see it's a lot like the Lapley barns that you run across as you're driving in the country in Fitchburg. So it was basically farmer needs a barn, and farm drops over to the Lapley brothers, and they say, sure, we'll build a barn for you. And that was life in Fitchburg in the very early part of the 20th century. The picture from our archives that shows Went Road, I think in 1908, and this picture shows the horse and buggy, much like the ones that Joan and Tom painted into the mural. That was life in Fitchburg. It's just amazing. The dedication for the mural is November 18th at 1:30 p.m. at the public library, and it's also the 25th anniversary of the Fitchburg Historical Society. Even if you're just a newcomer to Fitchburg, this is very much a part of your community.